You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
One of the basic aims of social history is the attempt to isolate a subgroup from a larger group under investigation. Here, the subgroup is mamzarim, legally defined bastards. The larger society is that of Jewish Palestine in antiquity. In this essay we will be trying to understand some of the limits of this larger society by probing how it viewed the mamzer and his parents, seeking to discover what this society considered normative and what it considered deviant. Mamzerim inhabited the fringe of this society, for they did not meet the social criteria for full-fledged membership. The study of the mamzer in antiquity will thus contribute to sociological, anthropological, and demographic, as well as historical knowledge.
I had somebody on my boards talking about the Israelites that have Gentile mothers aren't Israelites, okay? And this is the teaching that's been going on the internet lately, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and jump into this, okay? And what it is this the so-called person is trying to use Ezra, okay? Ezra to do some cutting on us using the Ezra. Okay.
In Jewish tradition, the special attitude towards the mamzer appears already in the Pentateuch. Deuteronomy 23, 1-9 contains a collection of laws including that of the mamzer. No man shall marry his father's former wife, so as to remove his father's garment. No man whose testes are crushed or whose member is cut off shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. No mamzer shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. None of his descendants, even in the 10th generation, shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. No Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. None of their descendants, even in the 10th generation, shall forever be kept from admission into the congregation of the Lord. This group of laws opens with forbidden liaisons, proceeds to defects in reproductive capability, continues with the mamzer, and concludes with links or relationships, not necessarily sexual, with foreign nationals living as neighbors nearby: Ammonites, Moabites, Edomites, and Egyptians.
Ezra 10 and 3. Yo, Deacon, are you in contact with these brothers? Are they coming back? Ezra 10 and 3.
Ezra 10 and 3.
Uh-huh.
Now therefore let us make a covenant with our God,
Uh-huh.
put away all the wives, and such as are born of them, according to the
The
counsel.
wives and the kids. These heathen women and these Israelite kids. I've seen people try to put a remix and a spin on this. There's no need to do that. This is what happened. These were Israelite children who were put away.
They can't answer this, you know. The only thing they can do is go to Nehemiah. They can't answer this, you know. The only thing they can do is go to Nehemiah. They can't answer this, you know. The only thing they can do is go to Nehemiah. They can't answer this, you know. The only thing they can do is go to Nehemiah, or they put the children away. That doesn't mean those children weren't Israelites.
But this, when you understand contextually, in retrospect, this is the precursor for the Gentiles, for Israelite foreigners. This is where it started.
What do you think Yahweh Shai is for? Yahweh Shai is for all those that were outcasted of Israel to return.
Go ahead.
The law forbidding the admission of the mamzer to the community of the Lord is a natural part of the set of laws connected to the concurrent social and religious status, as can be deduced from the description of the society as the community of the Lord or the congregation of God. Nehemiah 13:1. The laws are expressed as prohibitions requiring the mamzer, and also the Ammonite and the Moabite, to separate himself from the community of the Lord, even though, practically, the intent of the law seems to be the reverse. It is self-understood that the law is not directed against the Ammonite or the Moabite but for the good of the community of the Lord. The law's instruction, no Ammonite or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord, really has to be understood to mean the obverse. The community of the Lord shall not admit the Ammonite or Moabite. Thus the warning to the mamzer against coming into the community of the Lord is not so much a warning to the mamzer as it is a warning to the community against allowing the mamzer to enter, that is, joining them. In the same sense, the community of the Lord shall not admit a man whose testes are crushed. The community shall not accept a mamzer. The community shall not accept an Ammonite, and so on.
Go ahead.
It says, according to the counsel of my Lord.
You want that? Go ahead.
And of those.
The counsel of my Lord. Lord there is lowercase out of one. The Lord is Ezra there, not the Most High. Right? Go ahead.
The counsel of my Lord, and of those.
All I need is 3. Okay, go ahead. So like it's
and of those that tremble at the commandment of our God.
Okay, so Ezra said, listen, this is what we're going to do, right? And there was a purpose for that. Ecclesiastes 3 and 5. Just so we can understand why all of this happened. All right?
Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 5.
Read.
A time to cast away stones.
There's a time to cast away stones. Read.
And a time to gather stones together.
And then there's a time to gather stones together. We're called as Israel the lively stones. So that was a time. There's a time for all things. In that time, that was a time to cast away stones. Then when Yahushua said, listen, y'all go call everybody in, call the Israelites, go to the Israelites scattered amongst the nations. That was a time to gather stones together.
It is seen that the near assimilation of the mamzer to the Ammonite and the Moabite derives from the fact that these nations were descendants of offspring of illicit liaisons. Genesis 19:31-38. Explaining their distancing from the community of the Lord. The harshness of the law is stressed through the emphasis of the prohibition shall not be admitted into the community by the doubling even in the 10th generation and forever. Clearly the lawgiver followed an especially harsh line, as the law is not directed at the offenders, the parents who transgressed, but also punishes the descendants of the transgressors. If we view the prohibition as punishment, recall that, as a rule, in the laws of punishments, scriptural law deals with the transgressor rather than his descendants. The restriction on the children is also to be seen as an additional deterrent, and in a definite sense also as punishment, for the sinners. In addition, the lawgiver was not at ease until the punishment or exclusion extended to the 10th generation, reinforced by forever.
Yeah, so that was a time to gather stones together, right? Later on. But at that time, that was the time that stones were simply casted away. But there's not a commandment in the law that says you have to do that.
All right? This goes for all y'all trying to say that mixed people with Israelite fathers aren't of Israel, okay? And you just got cut, okay? So you're gonna need to come with more verses than that, bro, okay? Way more verses than that. And I'm ready for any verse you try to bring because I know it's a bunch of bull, okay? All right? You know how I know, all right? You know how I know?
Since the attitude towards the mamzer derives only from the sin of his parents, we find that his exclusion from the sanctuary is an additional expression of the exclusion of transgressors from the sanctuary. The convert and the mamzer are equal in their unfit ancestry, their defect resembling a defect causing exclusion from the sanctuary, as the disabled were forbidden to join the exclusive group of the Yahud. It appears that in this way the mamzer was equated with the leper from whom all distanced themselves. Both persons were forbidden to enter Jerusalem, a fortiori the sanctuary, and did not learn Torah because everyone kept away from him, because of his impurity. In antiquity, mamzerim were segregated from birth from the general Jewish society in many areas: dwellings, studies, marriage, etc. Society saw these people as outcasts because of the sin of their parents. Consequently, mamzerim could not be integrated in society in any way. Under Roman rule, in the first 3 centuries of the Common Era, Jewish society was undergoing various changes: transition from a traditional society to a modern society, constant growth, wandering from village to city, and exposure to Greco-Roman culture or society. It also appears that the family structure changed from clan to nuclear family. It also appears that additional changes occurred in Israelite society, as can be concluded from, among others, the final splitting of the Samaritans, suspected of being mamzerim, from the community of Israel.
So, hold on, I'll just take him off for now. Let me take this one. Yeah, so where we at? Boom. Okay. Read that in Ezra's first. Read that in Ezra's.
Okay.
This is the first Ezra.
Yes.
Yeah, So this is the verse that they started with, that they built their premise on, right? So read.
First Ezra 8:69. The nation of Israel, the princes, the priests and Levites, have not put away from them the strange people of the land.
So this is the whole context. This is where it starts. It says they had not put away from them the strange people of the land, of Ha'aratazar. What is the land? What's the land that's ours? Israel, right? What was it called before we went into it? Canaan, because it was inhabited by the Canaanites, right? So when it uses the term strange people of the land, and we're in the land of Israel, the strange people it's referring to is the Canaanites. You don't have to believe me. It's going to elaborate. Read.
Native. The problem is not exiles versus native. Rather, the opposition is Judeans versus Ashdodites. A number of Judeans married women from Ashdod, and Ammon, and Moab, with the result that their children were not able to speak Judean.
Nor the pollutions of the Gentiles, to wit, of the Canaanites.
Of who?
Canaanites.
The who?
Canaanites.
The Canaanites, read.
The Hittites.
The Hittites, which are also Canaanites, read.
The Perizzites.
Also Canaanites, read.
The Jebusites.
Also Canaanites, read.
And the Moabites.
Now the Moabites are next door neighbors, right? Go ahead.
Egyptians and Edomites.
Those are non-Canaanites, right? But notice it referenced the Canaanites first, right?
Go ahead and get Nehemiah chapter 13. But of course, hold that where we at and get Nehemiah. And just let the page go. So Nehemiah chapter 13. And go ahead and get me verse 23 and 24. And we're going to jump down to 26.
Nehemiah 13:23. In those days also I saw Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab.
So now these are nations who explicitly you don't see them mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 7. These are
Now go to Deuteronomy 7:1-4. Because this is how we have to understand the context. When it says the iniquity they did, well, what's the iniquity? Because iniquity is not defined in Ezra. Iniquity is defined in Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. That's where iniquity is defined. So let's go to the law and see what iniquity they're guilty of. Is it an iniquity to deal with another nation's woman, or is it iniquity to deal with a specific nation's woman? Let's find out. Read.
Deuteronomy 7:1.
Nehemiah attacks intermarriage with women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, ostensibly because the children of these marriages could not speak Hebrew. The subject of intermarriage with Ammon and Moab immediately brings Deuteronomy 23 into play again, assisted by the redactor's explicit treatment of intermarriage using Deuteronomy 23 at the beginning of the chapter. But the mention of Ammon and Moab in 13:23 does not fit the context particularly well. Nehemiah focuses on Ashdod as the problem.
When Yahweh thy God shall bring thee into the land, whither thou goest to possess it.
Read on.
And has cast out many nations before thee. The Hittites.
The who?
Hittites.
Isn't that who was named? The Hittites, read.
And the Girgashites.
And the Girgashites, read.
And the Amorites.
And the Amorites, read.
And the Canaanites.
And the Canaanites, that was also named, right? Read.
And the Perizzites.
Perizzites was also named, read.
And the Hivites.
And the Hivites, read.
And the Jebusites.
The Jebusites were also named, right? Read.
7 nations greater and mightier than thou.
Read on.
And when the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them, and utterly destroy them.
Read on.
Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. Neither shalt thou make marriages with them.
You should not make marriages with them. They made marriages with groups of people that God told them not to make marriages. Not just told, commanded us not to make marriages with. Canaanites, Hittites, Jebusites, Perizzites. We're not supposed to make marriages with them, but you had Levitical priests that did that. That's the iniquity.
As far as just saying, as far as these nations are just exclusive, like it's just them, nah, it's just an example that the Most High was given that set the standard in general for us to follow. So, read that, verse 1 through 4.
Deuteronomy 7, verse 1. When Yahweh thy power shall bring thee into the land whither thou goest to possess it, and hath cast out many nations before thee.
So it says how many?
Many nations before thee.
It said many nations. So this is something the Most High, he's just getting a generalization so you understand how he feels about this. Read on.
The Hittites and the Girgashites and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites, 7 nations, greater and mightier than thou.
So just naming something that, because he's not going to sit up there and name all the nations, you know, he's going to just give you an example of a few nations. So just so you understand the gist.
Read.
Neither shalt thou make marriages with them. Thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto thy son.
You shall not take their daughters to your sons. Brothers did that. That's the iniquity that was committed. There is no law in the Torah that says you cannot marry a non-Israelite woman.
I know that there's some, I guess there's some teachings that, people or brothers pardon that marry in other nations or whatnot, or don't necessarily condemn it because they hold to that and say the context of Deuteronomy 7 is only speaking about those particular nations, the Hamitic nations. Everybody else is fair game. But you got to remember, when we had to go conquer the land of Canaan, those were primarily the nations that was there that we had to encounter.
I'm not saying Ezra 8:51. I got Hassar read this. Hassar, bring it up.
All right, go ahead.
All right. First Ezra chapter 8, verse 69. The nation of Israel, the princes, the priests and Levites, have not put away from them the strange people of the land.
So we got to stop. Who are the strange people of the land?
The book ends with Nehemiah seeing the Israelites married to the women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, Neh 13:23, and the offspring unable to speak the ethnic language, Neh 13:24.
In this particular book, or whatever you want to call it, let's see who it was.
What land are we in right here?
This land is what the fuck was this?
We went back to Israel already during the time of Ezra.
You said what?
We went back to Israel. That's what Ezra's about. Us going back.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
So who are the strange people that lived in Israel?
In the post-exilic times, Nehemiah illustrates how highly charged language could be as a social marker. In those days also I saw Jews who had married Ashdodite, Ammonite, and Moabite women, and half of their children spoke the Ashdodite, and the language of those various peoples, and did not know how to speak Judean. Ne 13:23-24. The description of this foreign language as Ashdodite is socially loaded, especially since the language was probably some dialect of Aramaic.
I don't know about living there.
Well,
Is that what it said?
They lived there before we got there. So the strange people of the land would be the people who lived there before we got there and were left amongst us. Which were who?
The problem is not exiles versus native. Rather, the opposition is Judeans versus Ashdodites. A number of Judeans married women from Ashdod, and Ammon, and Moab, with the result that their children were not able to speak Judean.
All right, where do you read that?
Well, it's in Joshua. Get Joshua, they shall be thorns.
Yeah, I know.
Go ahead.
Joshua 23:13. Should I start? Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna get to the point. Joshua 23:13. Know for a certainty that the Lord your God, Yahweh, will no more drive out any of these nations from before you. They shall be snares and traps unto you, and scourges in your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from off this good land which the Lord your God hath given you.
Boom, so he left them amongst us, right? Because we didn't go.
The Ashdodites are also included among the enemies of Yehud in Nehemiah 4:7. There is no logic in seeing Ashdod as a foe before the expansion of the Hasmoneans to the west in the 140s BCE, an expansion which brought them closer to the territory of Ashdod.
And wipe them out properly. So now when we talk about the strange people of the land, that's who it's referring to. And once we keep, Ezra is going to elaborate, right? So go there.
Okay, fine. I was going to First Ezra 8:69 again. The nation of Israel, the princes, the priests and Levites, have not put away from them the strange people of the land, nor the pollutions of the Gentiles, to wit, of the Canaanites.
Of the Canaanites. So that's the first people that's named. The chief people that's named of this whole scenario are the Canaanites, which are the people who were the previous inhabitants of the land. Those are the strange people of the land. Canaanites, read.
The Hittites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Moabites.
So now it named them first. Now it's naming our neighbors, right? The Moabites, read.
Egyptians.
The Egyptians, they live on the other side of the west side, read.
And Edomites.
And the Edomites, they directly south, right? But it's chiefly and principally naming the Canaanites for a purpose.
Nehemiah attacks intermarriage with women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, ostensibly because the children of these marriages could not speak Hebrew. The subject of intermarriage with Ammon and Moab immediately brings Deuteronomy 23 into play again, assisted by the redactor's explicit treatment of intermarriage using Deuteronomy 23 at the beginning of the chapter. But the mention of Ammon and Moab in 13:23 does not fit the context particularly well. Nehemiah focuses on Ashdod as the problem. In those days also I saw Jews who had married women of Ashdod, Ammon, and Moab, and half of their children spoke the language of Ashdod, and they could not speak the language of Judah, but spoke the language of various peoples. It is tempting to read the inclusion of Ammon and Moab as an addition, inserted to connect Nehemiah's policy against Ashdodite language, whatever that may have been, with the policy mandated in Deuteronomy 23, which is silent concerning Ashdod. It is not clear whether Nehemiah is responsible for the inclusion of Ammon and Moab here. If he included them in the NM, then he would be making an appeal, though not completely explicit, to Deuteronomy for backing. If a redactor added them, along with the explicit mentions of Ammon, Moab, and the Book of Moses in 13:1, it would demonstrate the redactor's interest in linking Nehemiah's actions to authoritative texts. In this case, Deuteronomy 23:55. In either case, Nehemiah fails explicitly to cite Deuteronomy 23 but instead backs up his use of physical force, his famous hair-pulling, with the story of King Solomon 56. Did not King Solomon of Israel sin on account of such women? Among the many nations there was no king like him, and he was beloved by his God, and God made him king over all Israel. Nevertheless, foreign women made even him to sin. Solomon married foreign wives and it turned out badly. It literally was a great evil. Nehemiah's rhetorical appropriation of the story here is quite subtle. Using Solomon allows Nehemiah was age to mention the unsurpassed excellence of an Israelite king, while also alluding to the very destruction of that power, through sin, that has produced the current political situation. Nehemiah the Israelite stands in the tradition of great Israelite leadership, while Nehemiah the Persian governor derives authority from the Persian emperor, who reigns over Yehud because of sin. Nehemiah will enforce a ban on intermarriage, proving himself more disciplined than Solomon, using acts of violence available to him as Persian governor.
So now get Deuteronomy 7, because y'all brought up the fact that an iniquity was committed. And you're exactly right, an iniquity was committed. But what is the iniquity? Because it's not an iniquity that says, if you marry any woman that's not an Israelite, that's a sin. That's not nowhere in the Torah. But there is a specific set of women, right, who we are not to marry according to Torah, right? So go ahead, get that. Matter of fact, just 1 second.
They're claiming to be the Israelites. That's why I called the title, "A Bastard Shall Dwell in Ashdod." This is Zechariah 9:6. And a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod, and I will cut off the pride of the Philistines. All right? He said, a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod. All right? But he said, a bastard shall dwell in Ashdod. Well, first thing first, any scholar who want to go and say, what the hell is Ashdod? Where is it at? And then they'll go to the next part of trying to break down who's there living now, who lived there in the past, and why is it considered a bastard now? Okay? If you go look up Ashdod, it's going to pop up Ashdod, Israel. Ashdod is located in the southern district of the country on the Mediterranean coast, and to the north, Tel Aviv to the north, which is basically 20 miles from Tel Aviv, and Ashkelon to the south, about 12 miles away, and Jerusalem to the east, which is about 30 miles away. So basically, it's situated between Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Ashkelon, all within basically 10 to 30 miles away from it. So it's very close to Jerusalem and very close to Tel Aviv. Okay. Now, basically, it's in the middle of Israel. Okay. So when it says a bastard should dwell in Ashdod, wasn't not only talking about Ashdod, that one particular town. It was talking about Israel. Matter of fact, let's go into the scripture. We'll go to Deuteronomy 23:2. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of Yahweh. Even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of Yahweh. But he was basically saying a bastard should not enter into the congregation, not even forever. All right? And that's basically what it's saying. Not even 10 generations, not 20, not 5 generations, not 20, not 30, not 50. It's not happening. Okay? A bastard will not be lawfully allowed, legally allowed to be in Israel. So now that goes to say, well, who's this bastard dwelling in Ashdod today? Now you go in there, you go look up the people of Israel today, and you'll see Jewish people. All right. Now, before we even go into, let's go to the word bastard. That's from Hebrew H in the Strong Dictionary, 4464. All right. Mamzar. Mamzar or mamzar. The za, and the ra. So either mamzar or mamzar, right? And it says bastard, child of incest, illegitimate child, mixed population.
You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.